Today on CityCast Pittsburgh, if you like having a say in local politics, now is kind of your moment. We are 3 weeks from the Pennsylvania primary, and for the first time in more than 2 decades, the county could experience a whole lot of change. It's Tuesday, April 25th. I'm Megan Harris, and here's what Pittsburgh's talking about. Charlie Wolfson is a government reporter for Public Source, and Natalie Bencivenga has been covering politics for, a bunch of outlets in recent years. Next Pittsburgh, City Paper, even us. Natalie, Charlie, welcome back to CityCast Pittsburgh.
Oh, thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Let's dive in. We've got 4 big races here locally right now, all of them in Allegheny County: county executive, district attorney, county controller, county treasurer. So many counties. First things first. What are these people actually in charge of? Who wants to start? County executive.
Yeah, I could start. The county executive it's considered one of the most powerful political offices in Pennsylvania, certainly the most powerful in Western Pennsylvania. They are, as the name suggests, the chief executive of the Allegheny County government, which, like the county jail, the county health department, a budget of billions of dollars a year. It's the first time in 12 years that there'll be a new county executive because the incumbent, Rich Fitzgerald, is not running because he's term limited.
And not only that he's not running, that there's no obvious heir to the whole thing. You know, so often, and especially in Democratic politics in our city, you kind of know who's coming next or who's the up and comer. It's just not a thing, not an obvious thing right now.
Yeah, and it's one of those positions too where Fitzgerald was there for so long, you kind of not put it on autopilot, but I kind of did because, he was such a fixture on the scene for so long that then really researching and understanding the level of power that the county executive had really made my little antenna go up and go, okay, I need to take another look at this, not only as a journalist, but really as a voter. And, a lot of the work that I've done has really just been educating myself and others because we don't really know about what these people are really doing on the day to day.
I mean, I think we all have had, like you said, have taken it for granted. We've all been part of this political machine. I mean, that Rich Fitzgerald really set into motion, and Peduto carried through on the city side. A lot of our city mechanisms are set up by these two men. And so now we've already had some change in the city office. It's coming now for county. It's going to be interesting to see what comes next. So actually, speaking of established power players in our city, district attorney, we've had a 25-year incumbent in Steven Zappala. What does a district attorney do?
So the district attorney is basically the top prosecutor for the county. They set policy around criminal justice and the legal system as far as the government is concerned. As you said, Steven Zappala has been around for more than 20 years, so things have been done one way for more than 20 years. And his opponent, Matt Dugan, who is the chief public defender in the county, he's being supported, or a group is spending money on to boost him, which has supported other progressive district attorneys throughout the country, including Larry Krasner, the Philadelphia DA. So he's definitely viewed as kind of the progressive alternative to Zappala, and it's shaping up to be a competitive race.
Yeah, and this is one of those situations too, where once again, I feel like we almost had these little fiefdoms for so long that having someone coming in and wanting to shake things up that's looking at this through a totally different lens, I think is really impactful and important. And to Charlie's point, I think I'm surprised at how competitive this is becoming, because we all know in Pittsburgh, name recognition carries you a long way. So to have someone come in and really be making a strong show, I think does show you that it is time for new leadership, and generational shifting is happening as well. The city has gotten bluer, and there's a lot of progressive people that are living here now. And we're seeing that as it's been shaped with other races that may have surprised us in the recent past. So I don't think it's a done deal here that Zappala may pull this out, personally.
Yeah, just the fact that it's a competitive race, I think, really illustrates the momentum of the progressive movement in the region. And you have people like the sitting mayor of Pittsburgh or sitting state representatives endorsing this challenger, that helps him, and that may not have been possible just 4 years ago or so.
Yeah, I mean, just to go back 4 years, he did face a decent amount of a challenge in Teron Jenkins. He kind of took a big bite out of Zappala back when it was happening. Not enough, obviously. Zappala won a 4-year term, but it'll be interesting to see what comes with the next one.
Mm-hmm.
So, county controller, another minor fiefdom and a lot of name recognition. What are we thinking there?
Yeah, I mean, this is an important role too. This is the sort of fiscal watchdog, so to speak. And Corey O'Connor has been in the game a long time. Once again, that's a well-known name.
His father was mayor.
Yes.
He himself has served as a city councilor for a very long time.
Yes. So once again, it's sort of, do we move forward again with the sense of name recognition, or are we looking for new? And it's interesting because I always think Pittsburgh is such a petri dish for what's happening across the nation, because we're always seeing, I think lately, this same dynamic playing out where we have sort of this establishment, quote unquote, and then we have other new, younger, maybe in some cases more progressive voices, at least on the left, making a stand and saying, hey, things need to shift and things need to show. But on the flip side, there is something to be said for somebody with experience, and the person running against him is definitely going to be a newcomer to the space. So do we want, someone with no experience kind of being that watchdog and that taxpayer advocate? I'm not sure. I don't know.
Charlie, what are you hearing from folks?
I mean, this is definitely an under the radar race. So much. There's only so much attention to go around, and the two races we've already spoken about are taking up a lot of the airwaves, so to speak. But
that's what we're here for, though.
Exactly. These are the airwaves. O'Connor will certainly have, or I shouldn't say certainly, but he will most likely have a lot more money available to him to spend on this race. The name recognition, it is a big factor in, particularly once you're below the top of the ticket. And Darwin Lurba is new to the political scene, as Natalie mentioned. So definitely an uphill climb for him. O'Connor is an incumbent. He has not been elected to this post before. He was appointed to replace the previous controller, but he does have a little bit of incumbency advantage.
Right. Chelsea Wagner held the position for a very long time. Always kept it interesting in that role.
That's for sure.
And left it behind to be a judge.
Just to point out one other thing about him.
Yeah.
He has a ton of name recognition, certainly in the city of Pittsburgh, but the county includes about 900,000 people who don't live in the city of Pittsburgh.
Right.
Don't you think they know his name, though?
Yeah, I do. But they're not accustomed to voting for him. So it could be somewhat of a distinction.
That's a good point. And it's true, too. Once we leave the city limits, the way in which people are interacting with politics is different, right? There's a lot of
very different
energy around, I don't want the establishment and I want a maverick, and for better, for worse, right? That sort of sentiment. So maybe that could actually work in favor for his opponent, because maybe somebody new is what people will want, and that name recognition could actually work against him. We're all trying to, I think, analyze politics in a way that we haven't in the past, because everything has changed so rapidly in how we even look at the political landscape. You really can't analyze things the way you did maybe even 5 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. And then maybe our only true open field county treasurer. Charlie, you want to fill us in on what county treasurer does?
Sure. So the county treasurer, they don't do a lot of policy making. They're responsible for basically collecting taxes.
The really exciting stuff.
When you pay your property taxes, you're writing a check to John Weinstein, who is the county treasurer, and of course is one of the leading candidates for county executive. He's not running for treasurer, so for the first time since the 1990s, that's an open seat.
And this is kind of amazing to me that this, I don't know, if you look at the stars aligning right now, I mean, all of these positions opening at the same time. Wow. We could have a totally different experience politically and therefore communally, depending on how the wind blows. And I remember interviewing people when I was doing interviews for After Hours for the city paper last year, when we were talking to a lot of people running for politics. There was a lot of mixed reviews for, Anthony Coghill, who is running for treasurer. And so I'll be curious to see, if he can carry sort of his hometown advantage, so to speak, his space, or if people are just sort of ready for someone new. Once again, will that name recognition help or hurt him remains to be seen. But if there was ever a year for, new faces and new names, this could be the election cycle to do it.
Well, and he kind of jumped in a little bit late, too,
Yes.
because, initially everyone just assumed Weinstein was going to run again. And then he decided, nope, actually, this is the year I think I want to go for county executive, which we will talk more about. But yeah, so instead it's Mr. Coghill and
Erica Brusselars, who has secured the backing of really the progressive wing of the party, as well as, some of the center as well. So it's certainly not a shoe-in for Coghill by any means. Coghill, I should say, he was at Weinstein's campaign launch event, so he could be seen as like the Weinstein successor, I guess.
And depending on how you view Weinstein, that once again could help or hurt.
So let's talk more about some of the issues we've been kind of dancing around a little bit here with the county executive race specifically. Of course, the two of you and a friend of the pod, Tony Norman, who wasn't able to join us today, you were all able to talk to all 7 candidates for county executive last week in sort of a town hall debate with Next Pittsburgh and Public Source. I guess just broadly, what was the energy in the room? Because it was a sold out event, which I'm amazed by. So like literally hundreds of people on the live stream. Kudos, truly. How did folks react in the moment? Like, what was the vibe?
The candidates, they've done a lot of these types of forums in the last 2 months. They seemed like they had a routine down. They're used to sitting next to each other on a stage. But at the same time, they were pretty locked in. It's not always that all 7 of them are together. Some candidates just recently joined the campaign. Some of them missed certain events. And they probably sensed that this campaign is nearing its end, or at least starting to. So
a little bit of an exhale there.
I wish it were over sooner. But they're
Charlie's not
Charlie
exhaling.
would like to sleep, yeah.
they're starting to realize that they're running out of time to persuade voters. So making some stronger pitches. There were a couple situations on Tuesday when candidates took a swipe at one another. It didn't get out of hand, fortunately, but it's noticeably more intense, I would say, than it was in February.
Yes, and that was all very interesting too. And it's, to be honest, I was not expecting them to even be as direct with one another, even though I know we had set it up as a debate in hopes that we would get some of that rebuttal. But to Charlie's point, I think that sort of illuminated sort of the desperation of recognizing that we are coming to the end here, and I've got to not only make myself look good, but I got to make these people look bad.
And the backdrop to kind of the candidates sniping at each other a little bit is they don't disagree on policy that much.
Right.
They're not identical policy-wise. I wouldn't say that at all. But like they all really passionately said there needs to be big changes at the county jail. They all say they're pretty committed to improving air quality, just to name 2 examples.
A couple of things, though, that did stand out for me was, and, say what you want about Teresa Kalazy, and I think people have a lot to say about her as a candidate. But, she was calling out UPMC by name, and I thought that was a refreshing thing because, it was, and in her words, sort of this white elephant in the room where they were tiptoeing around conversation and she was just sort of hitting at it directly. And, people could say that maybe, Will Parker being on the stage, he's run for a lot of things, but I found it important and impactful with some of the things that he brought to light and to the forefront around racial justice and racial equity that I don't think a lot of the other candidates would have had to address or would have even needed to address. And I think acknowledging those specific things, health justice and racial justice and how they intertwine shows you where we are in the county and in this community in Pittsburgh right now, and where things are being talked about, but what hasn't and wasn't being talked about was just as important.
Well, and I thought, to his credit, Tony was pretty blunt with that question too.
Yes.
He said, you've ran for this.
Yeah.
You didn't do well. You've ran for this. You did not do well.
Yeah.
You clearly want to be a public servant, but you're not going to win this either. Why are you here?
Right.
Which, Good on you for just throwing that out there. And his answer was actually, just as you said, Natalie, it was like, you know what? I want you to hear me. That's what I want. Even if you're not going to vote for me, I want to be present in this room, and I want to make sure that someone has to answer to it. And props for that. We need people on a stage to do it.
I agree. Or else it just becomes politics as usual, which everybody's tired of. Clearly.
Yeah. So we mentioned Teresa Kalezi and Will Parker. Some other names that folks may be more or less familiar with. John Weinstein, of course, who is facing some pretty significant ethics questions right now about his various positions. The Post-Gazette, of course, has been doing some really wonderful reporting on this. Adam Smeltz, Mike Wershagen, and others. Charlie, are you familiar kind of with some of these questions that have been coming up enough that you could help us make a little bit of sense of it?
Yeah, so there have been a few different storylines around Weinstein that have come up in the last month or two. One of them, the one that was reported by the Post-Gazette, was centered around when Weinstein stopped being a member of the Alcosan board a few years ago. The story alleges that he tried to make a deal with State Representative Emily Kincaid, where allegedly he told her, if you step down from the Alcosan board, I will help you get reelected. He has completely denied that this happened. There was another story, this one was reported by myself and Chris Potter at WESA.
Yeah, props.
That he helped get a judge elected, Sabrina Corbell. That's not in dispute at all. He did do that. Shortly after she took office, though, she hired in her chambers a lawyer who did pro bono work for Weinstein's fiance and a son of that fiance. He denies any wrongdoing in that hiring process as well, but that's out there as well. And just last week, Chris Potter of WSA reported that in about 2002, Weinstein and his father were accused of forging a number of mail-in ballots in a local election, which he also recently has completely denied any wrongdoing. So there's a lot to think about there.
Do you think voters are going to care, going to follow it, going to notice?
I mean, it's hard to say how many.
Natalie, you look so sad.
It's hard to say how many voters will even know about these stories. I mean,
that's why we need to have these kinds of conversations like we're having right now, Charlie. This is the impact, because the reality is you're right. I mean, on the average voter's radar, these things aren't really out there because there isn't enough local journalists being able to cover these things to the extent to which I think we all wish they were out there. So all of these kinds of conversations I find so valuable and just bringing to the forefront these complicated conversations. But it would be nice to go into the next era.
I will say the percentage of people who vote in off-year primaries who read the news closely is,
Don't tell us, Charlie.
No, I'm not going to tell you the percentage. But I'm sure it's a lot.
I want to know. What is it? Do you know
I don't. I'm sure it's a lot higher than the percentage of the general population who reads the news. So primary voters are more likely to read the news than just everyone, I would think.
Well, that's a fair point. And thank you for that optimism.
Nowadays, when you more people get their mail-in ballot to vote, they could open up their laptop, Google each of the candidates, see what's out there on them, which you couldn't really do before.
I will say, listening to all of the candidates when they were up on the stage, I was impressed, at least at one point, with everyone. There was something good that I think everyone had to say, or something that I said, oh, you know what, that's an interesting answer. That's a really promising idea.
I do think it's a pretty, for a lot of voters, it's not an easy choice. There's a lot of liberals, like in the 14th Ward, Democrats. A lot of people I've heard are, they're weighing, should I vote for Michael Lamb or Sarah Innamorato? And people are torn, and people are coming down on different sides of that.
Michael Lamb, longtime city controller, Sarah Innamorato, state house representative.
Yes, correct. And that's only 2 of 7 or 6 candidates in the Democratic primary. So it's going to be,
I don't want to do a disservice to anybody. I think that leaves Dave Fawcett,
yes.
who has been a long time county councilor, and Joe
Rocky, who was the only Republican on the
Yeah.
stage.
Only Republican. So he will make it to November. That's the one we know.
Sure. Yes.
He will.
There's no drama there.
Well, and I think that should be our final point, right? If you care about city politics, if you are a registered Democrat, if you are a registered independent or Republican who wants to vote in a primary, you have until May 1st to change your registration to be able to vote in the Democratic primary if you want to be able to have a decision about this initial field. And this area tends to vote pretty heavily Democratic. So if you want to have a decision about the final choice, this could be the moment. You have 1 week to figure out your registration. This is my soapbox. I will die on the hill.
Oh, I felt that. You have 1 week.
1 week. Come on. It's super
Serious.
easy. We'll have links in the show notes. Charlie has links in every one of his stories. Natalie, you talk about it on Instagram and other places all the time. We really want our county to get out there and have their voices be heard, whatever that means.
Yeah, and it's just so important to have these conversations and really break it down for people into more digestible pieces, because a lot of this is a little confusing and it's complicated and there's a lot of moving parts all at once. So I really appreciate the opportunity to talk through it with you guys. So thank you.
Absolutely. Natalie, Charlie, thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
A little more news before you go. If this episode's got you raring to do your civic duty, here are some important things you need to know. As we mentioned, if you are not already registered to vote here, or if you want to change your party registration to vote in our closed primary system, the deadline is this coming Monday, May 1st. And if you want to request a mail-in or absentee ballot, you've got to do that by Tuesday, May 9th. Pennsylvania has no excuse mail voting now, which means that you don't need a reason to request your mail-in ballot. And if you'd like to vote early, but you like to turn your ballot in person, the Allegheny County Elections Division just opened an over-the-counter voting kiosk. The Trib reports that as long as you're already registered to vote, you can head over there for one-stop voting. Apply for that mail-in ballot, fill it out, turn it in, all right on the spot. You can do that through May 9th. After that day, you can still go there to drop off a mail-in ballot through May 16th. The kiosk is located on the first floor of the county office building downtown, and it's open from 8:30 to 4:30 every weekday, and of course, up until 8 p.m. on Election Day. That's all for today here on CityCast Pittsburgh. If you're liking the show, vote for us with a 5-star rating and a nice review, and make sure you're subscribed to that Hey Pittsburgh newsletter. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Talk to you soon. Sorry about the sniff into the microphone.